Namaskar. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Schneider Electric, I, Geetika Ganjudhar, your host this evening, welcome you all to this evening. As a citizen world, I must say here that this event is a very, very important one. Having said that, it is my duty as a good host to thank you all for taking the time out and joining us here this evening. आप सभी समय निकाला आज यहाँ आए हैं. आपका बहुत-बहुत शुक्रिया, ladies and gentlemen. We're all gathered here this evening to celebrate Schneider Electric's 50-year-old journey in India. Yes, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary. And on this momentous occasion, we are taking a pledge to conserve 50 million kilowatts of energy, and we are taking this movement to 50 cities across the length and breadth of our nation, carrying with us the noble message of energy efficiency. To welcome you all to this journey, I'd like to invite forward Dr. Satish Kumar, who is the Energy Efficiency Ambassador and Vice President, Schneider Electric. Before he steps on, I'd like to introduce him to you all a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, in 22 years of his glorious career as a professional, he's literally led the energy management business. He is a recognized expert in the field. He's authored more than 50 journals and conference papers on the subject. He is a co-founder and former chairman of Board of Efficiency Evaluation Organization and co-founder and vice chair of AEEE. Please welcome Dr. Satish Kumar.
Thank you. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to welcome you all on this momentous occasion. 50 years in the life of a company is a really big deal, and we are celebrating with all of you by launching this event today. I would also like to welcome all of you who have spent some time to come and listen to the panel discussion that is going to take place and the plenary address that Dr. Ajay Mathur will be giving in a brief time. What is the purpose of this occasion? I would let Mr. Anil Chaudhury talk about that when we have the panel discussion. But just to give a very quick overview, we are, of course, celebrating our 50 years in India. We want to take the message of energy efficiency to 50 cities in India as we do that. And when we talk about energy efficiency, we are looking at energy efficiency not just for large enterprises, but for the bottom of pyramid who are really struggling to get access to energy as well. So as Schneider talks about it, that we are in the business of power generation to power plugs, we are talking about like covering the entire spectrum of the Indian population with our message and with the launch of this event. I'm going to request first Dr. Ajay Mathur to come on stage and take his seat here. I'm going to request Mr. Gopal Saxena, CEO of BRPL, to come on stage and take his seat here. I'm going to request Mr. Arunabha Ghosh, Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, to come and take his seat here. I'm going to request our country president, Mr. Anil Chaudhury, to come and take his seat here. Before I invite Dr. Ajay Mathur, I'll just take a brief moment to introduce our chief guest, Dr. Ajay Mathur, along with all the panelists. Dr. Mathur doesn't need any introduction, and he said that he wants me to keep the introduction brief, so I will. Dr. Mathur is the Director General of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency since July 2013, and he held this post earlier from 2006 to 2012. Prior to resuming as Director General, he was Director of Green Climate Fund in Bonn. As Director General of BEE, he coordinates the National Energy Efficiency Program, including the Standards and Labeling Program for Equipment and Appliances, the Energy Conservation Building Code, the Industrial Energy Efficiency Program, and the DSM program in the building, lighting, and municipal sector. Dr. Mathur received his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Roorkee and his PhD from the University of Illinois. He received the Outstanding Alumni Award from University of Illinois in 2002. Welcome, Dr. Mathur. I would like to introduce Mr. Gopal Saxena, who is the CEO of BSES Rajdhani Private Limited. A lot of people within Schneider Electric India know him. He's the CEO of BSES Rajdhani Power Limited. He has worked in diversified industry segments in core and infrastructure industries, including power engineering, electronics, and telecommunication. Mr. Gopal Saxena has graduated from IIT Kanpur in 1972 and has completed his advanced management program for Administrative Staff College in India. Welcome, Mr. Gopal Saxena. Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, he is the CEO of Council on Energy, Environment and Water. CEEW is an independent policy research organization in India. With experience in more than 30 countries, Dr. Ghosh has devoted his career to public policy. His work intersects international relations, global governance, and human development, including climate, energy, water, trade, and conflict. He advises governments, industry, and civil societies around the world. Dr. Arunabha holds a doctorate and MPhil in international relations from Oxford and MA in philosophy, politics, and economics. And he was the topper from the economics department from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University. And Mr. Anil Chaudhury, of course, doesn't need any introduction. He is the country president and managing director of Schneider Electric India Private Limited. Before assuming his current responsibility, he was the senior vice president, Global Sales Organization of Infrastructure BU, and a member of the leadership team. He joined Schneider Electric in June 2010 after acquisition of distribution business of ex-Arriva T&D, where he was member of Executive Management Committee by Schneider Electric. Mr. Anil Chaudhury has held various positions in general management, sales, business development, project management, design and engineering in France and India throughout his career of 27 years in the energy sector. He's known for his leadership, team building, people and business development strategy, and execution skills. He has executive MBA from Harvard University and Stanford University. Dr. Mathur, I would like to request you to come and unveil the study that Schneider Electric has done in partnership with Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. And I would request Dr. Koshi Chirel to come on stage and be part of this unveiling ceremony.
Well done, Koshi.
Sir, if you can go in the center, maybe.
Thank you. Wonderful. Great. So now we have a job to do together. Thank you.
Dr. Mathur, may I request you to come and deliver the plenary address for today's event?
Satish, Mr. Chaudhury, Mr. Saxena, Dr. Ghosh, friends. Indeed, 50 years is a momentous occasion in a company's life. When Satish told me of this occasion, I asked people around on what is the average life of a company in India. And I was told that, well, this is a difficult question, because it's difficult to keep track of it. I said, well, companies of a size, let's get data from the public institutions where companies are registered. And it turned out that approximately 40%, let's say half, of the companies effectively die within 2 years, effectively. They may survive legally for many years, but their operations are over in 2 years. So you can imagine the very, very, very small percentage of companies which are here and have a large audience, a diverse audience, to celebrate their 50th birthday. A very happy birthday to you, and I hope that we'll be here for the 60th, the 75th. I don't know whether I'll be around for the 100th. Sounds difficult, but I'm sure that some of you who are much younger will be here. We're here because of Schneider's emphasis on energy efficiency as a business. And there can't be a better time for it. If you see how this country has done on energy efficiency in the past few years, we see that the energy intensity of the economy has declined by about 35% in the first 11 years of this century, 2000 to 2011. That's pretty good. Approximately half of it has been because of the move from the manufacturing sector to the services sector. But if you take those two sectors apart, even in the manufacturing and the services sector, there have been huge declines in the energy intensity of those individual sectors. The World Bank estimates that 43% of this total decline in energy intensity has been due to energy efficiency actions. We did a quick back of envelope study to see what does this mean in terms of investments. And I must confess I was rather surprised to see that this means an investment of about 50,000 crore rupees a year. That's about 5% of the total investment that is made in the Indian economy every year. That's a large sum. Yet, each one of us knows that there are still huge opportunities. I think it would be useful to spend a minute to consider where is it that the investments occur, and therefore, where is it that the investments don't occur? Or, let me put it this way, it's much more difficult to attract investments into certain applications and areas. Clearly, large industries, large buildings, large corporations do not have a problem in attracting investments, either because of the size of their balance sheets, their relationships with banks, or because of the fact that it's so important for their competitive survival. The places where the problems in investment occur are precisely those where these kinds of attributes don't exist. Relatively small size, for example. So, if you are talking of smaller projects, it may not get the management attention it deserves. It may not get the attention that it deserves from the banking sector. And you may not be able to attract the attention of vendors who will provide the investments. Second, and let me give you an example. You know, we are working with SIDBI to provide a line of credit on energy efficiency to the SME industry. The average size of the project is probably in the 20 to 30 lakh rupee range. The transaction costs on this are very high, both for the organization. Remember, SMEs are typically a single executive organization. And for that executive, who's the CEO, who's the CFO, who's the CTO, for him then to focus time on developing an energy efficiency project becomes a bit of a challenge. It's also difficult for SIDBI, because the amount of time that it takes to process a 20 lakh rupee loan is the same as it is to process a 20 crore, maybe not a 200 crore, but certainly a 20 crore loan. And therefore, there is a hesitation as to whether they would recover their costs or, more importantly, make the margins that they do on their normal financing. Now, as a result of this, compared to the savings, the project development costs are relatively high. This becomes a challenge because then it becomes difficult to capitalize it. Because as soon as you capitalize it, it appreciably increases the loan amount, and therefore becomes a challenge to the organization, and therefore its overall profitability completely changes. The last issue is that of risks. Interestingly enough, especially when we are talking of new technologies, this is a word we hear very often. And every time that we have gone in, well, with one or two exceptions, we have found that the risks are actually a matter of perception. It's because there isn't enough information and confidence within either the bank or the end user that this is a technology that would provide the savings that are promised. So it's a perception issue, but it's a real issue and therefore needs to be addressed. What are the kinds of things, therefore, that are needed? We believe it's important to provide, first of all, comfort to financial institutions so that they lend for smaller energy efficiency projects, especially for projects that are intermediated by energy service companies. In other words, if a third company comes in and says that I will put in a more efficient air conditioning system or a more efficient boiler and be paid from the savings, the banks are uncomfortable either with the technology or the business model. In order to give them comfort, we believe that there is a place for a partial risk guarantee system, where the financial institution, the bank providing the loan, can buy a guarantee that in case the bank does not get repaid, some percentage, typically 50% of the outstanding loans would be paid by the guarantee. So we are not letting the bank off the hook completely, but providing him comfort for 50%. And the point is that after the bank has used the guarantee once, twice, 3 times, they become used to the business. They become comfortable with the kinds of transactions involved and can therefore cost it into the loans that they provide. The second issue, which I think is important, is that of lowering the transaction costs. As I said, project development costs are large. It is important, therefore, to have relatively simple monitoring and verification protocols. I have been a champion of a rather instrumented monitoring and verification procedure, as a result of which the savings are calculated every year, and that the sharing of the savings that are so estimated forms the basis of the payments to the energy service company. I am now coming to the conclusion that this is not really possible. It adds to transaction costs, and therefore we need simpler methodologies. We are looking out for ways to do so. The third issue, I believe, is innovative financing, particularly on equity and on cash flow money, as well as longer tenor loans. Again, this is something that we are working on banks to make these kinds of resources available. The last issue that I'd like to flag is the importance of energy efficiency users being able to see, feel, and get first-hand experience on new projects. As Schneider goes into the country, across the country, and establishes demonstration projects, pilot projects, it provides a see, hear, feel experience, which I believe is ultimately the last intervention that is needed before you convert many, many, many more people into the energy efficiency movement. I again wish Schneider a very happy birthday and hope that the next 50 years are even more glorious in your history. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ajay Mathur, ladies and gentlemen, sir, always a pleasure to hear you speak. Ladies and gentlemen, I am definitely not an expert on the issue, but I do my bit. I am the switch-off Hitler at home, and my 3-year-old daughter, when she steps out of her room, she does say, "Switch off the lights, Mama," so I think I've achieved a little bit. I'd like to quote for you lines from an iconic Michael Jackson song from the 90s, "Heal the world, make it a better place, for you and for me, and for the entire universe." Let's go out there and do just that, ladies and gentlemen. On that cue, it is time to now begin the panel discussion, achieving the potential of energy efficiency as a viable resource in India. To moderate this session, I now invite forward Dr. Satish Kumar. Please, sir.
Thank you. Welcome all of you to this very important panel discussion. And I am indeed privileged to have such a gathering of luminaries from various sectors who are going to talk about the importance of energy efficiency in our lives and for our nation. Mr. Saxena, may I start with you? As the CEO of one of the largest distribution companies and a company that is operating in Delhi, the pressures and the challenges that you face, my question is that how do you see utilities evolving as in their business when we are looking at different set of issues that utilities have to face, right from maybe promoting residential energy efficiency through appliance standards, maybe through commercial building efficiency or industrial efficiency through demand-side management program, demand response programs, and also the role that the technology can play with the digitization movement and how it is going to actually affect some of the smart grid creation and ultimately the demand response programs that can be administered by your utility. So, sir, if you can share your thoughts on these issues.
I think you have touched on very relevant issues, Satish. But if I may be allowed to start off from the larger perspective, I think in the context of India, we're looking at 4 major challenges. The challenge of access, the challenge of availability, the challenge of affordability, and finally the challenge of technology. And I'm delighted that in these last several years, BRPL and Schneider Electric have worked together on the aspects related to technology, where we have a long and enduring relationship. And I'm further delighted that we supplement that relationship through the recent agreement that we have to bring in energy efficiency services to our consumers. Now, having said as much, the fact is that energy efficiency is the bedrock on which all these issues, demand response, smart grid, etc., is based. The second is that convergence of the telecom, the internet, and power has seen tremendous changes in the way we manage our networks. And that's what opens up smart opportunities, smart grids. Our grids were always smart. Smart at that period of time, at that juncture. And smart using the technology that was known then. Now when we look at it, there is a vast plethora of technological options which allow us to improve upon our delivery, to improve upon our reliability, and to improve upon the access. And that inevitably brings down the cost. and the affordability. We are looking at a situation where there will be immense challenges which will come our ways in the wake of increasing land prices, not enough rights of ways available, providing power to rural areas, remote areas where there's no grid connectivity. And if we can conserve our electricity, bring in greater energy and efficiency and productivity in whatever we do, we will actually have gone to spread the access in a greater measure and therefore make it more affordable. Today it's a shame that in a country our size, we have transmission and distribution losses of 30%. I mean, all right, I accept that a large part of it may be commercial losses. But even on the technological losses, there is great scope to bring down the technological losses quite effectively through the use of technology, through the use of smart grid solutions, to bringing in energy efficiency and to making more power available for end usage. Having said as much, I think I would also like to touch on what Dr. Mathur said. We've also worked with the CII in evolving this financing model. And we feel that the distribution utilities play a very strong part in the measurement and verification process. Number one, they are able to identify, pinpoint large consumers who have the potential to be able to bring about energy efficiency in a sustained manner. Secondly, we are able to monitor it continuously. And thirdly, we are able to provide a support to the banking and financial institutions to be able to effectively deploy resources towards the energy efficiency that is contemplated to occur. So, all said, I think there is great potential. And I feel that if all of us work concertedly towards this end, I think we will have made India a far brighter place, a more powerful place to stay in. Yeah. Let me end by complimenting and congratulating Schneider Electric for the 50 years of Efficiency Yatra, the Electricity Yatra. That's just 50% of the time we've had electricity in India. So I think the history of electricity in India is just 100 years old. You're already crossed the halfway stage. And who knows where you go on from here. All the best to you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saxena. Anil, if I can come to you. You heard Dr. Mathur speak on some of the new thrust areas that we is going to push, and also Mr. Saxena talk about the role that he sees for utilities. As a Fortune 500 company, as a company that has a tagline of Global Energy Management Specialist, may I request you to share your thoughts on two topics. One is that what was the thinking behind launching Xperience Efficiency and making efficiency as a central theme of this 50th year celebration. And the second thing is that as a business, as an industry player which is in the business of energy management and energy efficiency, how do you see Schneider Electric's role in the current environment where energy is a front page news, as well as looking out 10, 20 years where we know that energy efficiency is going to be important in India's journey for energy independence?
Thank you, Satish. And probably I will answer the second question first and then go to the first question. Now, Schneider Electric, for sure, presence in India for 50 years, and that's what we are celebrating our journey of that today. But when we look at India as a country, and especially the challenges which country faces for energy, and more specifically electricity energy, we see a huge potential in this country. And why so? Because we put that into 2, 3 main perspectives. First, we are a young country, when we talk in terms of our journey for industrialization, for infrastructure development. And as we all know, energy is a very important enabler for industrialization and infrastructure development. But at the same time, as far as our country is concerned, the cost of energy, the availability, the reliability, these are all very challenging aspects. And in fact, it reminds me a story which I heard, that when the developed countries or the Western countries in late 70s, early 80s were looking for shifting manufacturing bases into new economies, India was one of those first countries which were looked at. But since as a country we were not able to commit on the quality power in terms of the availability, in terms of reliability, a lot of those companies have gone further to China, and that has changed the whole history of how the manufacturing base would have been for the world. I think second important element is the technological improvement in this particular field. As Saxena has said and has been touched by Dr. Mathur as well, there's a very strong development of technology adaptation within this electricity energy sector. Be it in terms of automation, and we can go to a long, and we can spend hours on discussing about smart grid, the automation. Grids have already been smart, but have been able to keep pace with adopting technology the way it is developing on. And we are talking of smart grids, and more now it's expanding towards smart cities. We still have a lot of opportunity as far as the country is concerned. And I think the third aspect is the regulatory and the competition aspect within this whole cycle. You know, the regulatory authorities being powerful in India, it's a very recent history which brings in some regulation within this industry. At the same time, I think as far as the businesses are concerned, I think the competitive advantage which comes as far as when you are more efficient in terms of energy, not only in terms of your overall cost of products going down, but at the same time consumer also being attracted toward how you are using renewable energy and how you are using green energy. This is the three top factors which provides as a company us a huge potential and a huge room to look for as we go on operating and adopting new and new technology and then bringing new and new technology into the country. Now when we looked at this and when it comes to Schneider Electric, we are a company which is primarily in energy management and efficiency. So when we were discussing about that we are completing our 50 years, and when we look at the challenges of the country in terms of all these three aspects which I just described, I think we agreed that there could not be any better way but to add on to bringing the awareness of efficiency in energy sector within the country. And that's how we said that, okay, let's take this forward and start working on the project which has given this shape today, which we are calling as Xperience Efficiency Yatra 2013, basically meaning that we want to take our technology to the second and third tier cities within the country, to take it to the people, to take to the, where the masses are, to tell them how Schneider Electric with its technology, with its solution, can bring the efficiency in energy and help you make most of your energy what you're doing. At the same time, we also wanted knowledge as well as access of energy at the bottom of the pyramid. So we are also launched as part of this initiative, a very important initiative which is we call as Spreading Happiness. This is a joint initiative with Sachin Tendulkar to bring access to energy to all those people in the remote part of the country which have no light in their life after the sun is set. So we are also linking this, going again to the masses and making them aware of how they can use new technology, renewable energies, and especially The one which we are creating as India, which is solar lamps to light the life and have access to the energy. So these are some of the themes which we have put in front of us, and that's how we have come with this project going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil. Arunabha, if I can direct my next question to you. CEW is a non-profit organization. I think you have been recognized for the work that you have done in the last 3 years. When we talk about energy access, when we talk about climate change, when we talk about some of these complex issues, we know that no one particular sector can solve it on its own. So whether it's government, whether it's non-profit, whether it's the industry. And Anil provided a segue in terms of what do you see in terms of when you look at the energy situation in India, and more specifically when we talk about like almost 50% of the population having either no access to energy or having access to energy for 4 to 6 hours a day. How do you see the government and industry collaborating together with non-profit organizations to address this very, very important, like a moral and social imperative that faces this nation? And what kind of business models do you think will help us in terms of moving forward and addressing this important challenge?
Thank you. First of all, again, as the speakers before me, happy birthday to Schneider. And I hope to be around for the next 50 years, certainly.
Power to.
And my daughter will certainly be around, so whatever you do will be for the better. Let me answer the question first by taking a step back. And this has been touched upon by all three speakers so far. But if you think of it from a strategic point of view, energy efficiency is a strategic imperative for India. All of the last 2 months, we've been having palpitations about the currency and oil prices and inability to get coal out of the ground and the impact on the balance of payments, etc., etc., etc. In that conversation, energy efficiency was never discussed. And if you take the world's biggest energy consumer, the United States, one estimate suggests that over the past 40 years, the energy that has been provided to the United States via energy efficiency is greater than what it has got from coal, oil, gas, nuclear, and renewables put together. Now, part of the reason is that a lot of manufacturing in the United States in the last 40 years also shifted outside the United States. But even if you park that aside for a second, the point I'm trying to make is that for a country like India, we can't afford not to put energy efficiency at the same par as other resources that we think about, more from a supply side perspective of whether it's coal or oil or gas. The other strategic imperative is energy demand. In India, there are, as per our last census, there are 80 million households without electricity. Now, if you just do a simple back-of-the-envelope calculation, suppose we give ourselves a target of 2025, that by then, all of this backlog will be met. And let's also assume that from today, every new household in the country is automatically electrified. So there are two big assumptions here. With those targets, what it essentially translates down to is that every single hour, we have to electrify 725 to 750 households. Every single hour. Some of it will come from the grid, some will be off-grid, and some of them will be left to fend for themselves, right? So these are two strategic imperatives. One macro, and the other also macro, but which actually has a human element to it. So it's in that context that we have to think about the vision that Schneider Electric is putting forth. Where does energy efficiency fit in? How do we act on this? And where does energy access become important? So let me just take a a minute and a half or so on energy access. We've been examining at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, how do you provide electricity to households that are off the grid? Of course, you can wait for the grid to arrive, or you can do something else. And that something else could be distribution of lamps, it could be biogas-based power, it could be small wind, it could be small hydro, but underlying all of that is what is sustainable. Where is not just sustainability in terms of the environment, but sustainability in terms of business. So we've identified 250 companies around the country, dotted around the country, that operate in the off-grid energy space. We don't want to cherry-pick technologies. We don't want to cherry-pick business models. Let a million flowers bloom in India. What all of those business models, however, will need is higher efficiency of the delivery of electricity, whether it's using DC appliances, whether it's improving the efficiency of the microgrid, etc. And they will also need something that Dr. Mathur talked about, the lowering of transaction costs and the access to credit. So the challenges that big industry faces, medium industry faces, is also the challenge that a small household faces. So if the challenges are common, I think we can put our brains to it. I'll stop there for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you, Arunabha, for those very incisive and thoughtful remarks. Dr. Mathur, I'll come back to you. You talked about helping businesses sort of make a business case for energy efficiency by looking at how energy efficiency investments can be made available, how technologies can be evaluated, and how businesses also can become viable. As sort of the main body, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, we have seen over the last 6-7 years when it was your first stint at BEE, there were many policy initiatives in standards and labeling, in building energy code, in DSM programs that were launched. On one side, there is a thinking that a lot of the policies have been launched. We need to probably come up with more stringent compliance, better sort of monitoring. On the other side, a lot of people think that in India, you need regulation. Danda leke kaam karana hai, nahi to yahan pe kaam nahi hoga. So what is your thinking and what is sort of like your vision moving forward? Do you see that we will have more stringency in terms of compliance and adherence to the regulations that have already been launched? Or do you see that there will be a slew of more legislation that will help us become more energy efficient as a nation?
I think the answer is in smart regulation. And smart regulation, in a sense, is a commonsensical term. We don't regulate everything. Use an ABC approach. Look at the places where, number one, the largest amount of energy is going to be used in the future. Number two, where the largest opportunities for energy conservation occur. Those are our areas of challenge. So what are those? They are energy use in households, air conditioners, refrigerators, etc. It is the energy use in commercial buildings, primarily air conditioning and insulation. It is energy use in industry. Industry in general processes, but also the use of the low-grade waste heat, 120 to 160 degrees centigrade, which is vented to the atmosphere. So these are essentially the large challenges that occur. Number two, by far and large, I mean, I spoke of the places where it is difficult for energy efficiency to reach, but by far and large, once you are there, energy efficiency becomes a challenge in which there is a common interest between the country, the energy user, and the supplier of equipment and services. Therefore, business models matter. Or, let me put it in another way, history matters. If you are successful, it is possible to build on the success. So if you look at our standards for refrigerators and air conditioners, they were tightened on the 1st of January 2012, and they'll again be tightened on the 1st of January 2014. So what was say, let's say, a 3-star air conditioner in 2009 could be a 1-star in 2015. And what was a 3-star refrigerator in 2009 would be out of the market, because the next step for refrigerators is actually a 2-star step. So places where there is a large energy use, we certainly will see that we try to strengthen it. Building codes is an example. You worked with us so closely on the development of the energy conservation building code. We are now in the process of tightening it. Why? Because now there is experience. The first time around, we had no idea what to do. Now we know what are the 7 areas where you have to focus. What are the kinds of technologies that are available? What are the supply chains? What are the costs? And most importantly, what are the cost reductions that are happening? So in that sense, it is a field that is continuously changing. As far as the scope is concerned, as I said, we use an ABC approach, but the ABC approach doesn't mean that everything is static forever. Mr. Chaudhury and I were talking a few minutes ago about data centers. Well, 5 or 6 years ago, data centers almost didn't exist. If you tried to find out what is the percentage of energy used in data centers in India, it was so small that it was difficult to ascribe a percentage to it, not even a percentage point. Well, it's more than 1% now, and growing. So clearly, new areas will emerge into which we will provide our emphasis. The last point that I want to make is that of approach. You know, I think everybody who uses energy in India, whether it is you and I at home, or in our offices, or in our industries, have the issue of our energy bill. And if we want to make sure that the money on the energy bill doesn't rise, well, energy rates will rise, but if the money on the bill doesn't rise, the only option is that we invest in energy efficiency. I believe that all of us together, and I think this is a good example of the kind of partnership that is needed, we need to be able to put out the idea that it is possible for each one of us to be able to manage to keep our energy bills constant. I think if we do that, Schneider's goal is achieved, as is ours, as is Arunabha's, as is Mr. Saxena's.
I would just like to open the floor for any further discussions before we start taking questions from the audience. So we have gone through one round. We emphasized, I think everybody is emphasizing the importance of energy efficiency. Maybe if I can use the word negawatts. So some people call it the fifth fuel, some people call it negawatts. And as Arunabha, you said that the amount of, I think, negawatt that can be generated, say for US, California, Germany, Japan, I mean, where a lot of the good work has been done, we would really like to see India becoming one of the leaders in the field of negawatts. And I think that's something that would be really, really something that we can be proud of. But before I do that, any sort of like comments from our panelists on some of the points that has been mentioned by other speakers?
If I could just supplement what Dr. Mathur said. I mean, Ajay and I have been discussing this aspect of energy efficiency. And, you know, we were sharing how between us we've been able to keep our energy bill constant, in fact, lower than what it used to be, despite the energy costs rising and despite a growth in our consumption levels, if I may. Not so services. Much services. Mm-hmm. But having said as much, I think just a couple of points that I'd like to make, Satish. You know, I am from, let's say, the older generation, but I see a lot of young faces over here. Faces, people who've grown used to internet, who've grown used to the mobile phone, the smartphone, and who've grown used to availability of electricity 24/7. And when you look across these faces, you see a lot of hope, you see optimism, you see a brighter future. But when you go into rural India, you go into many parts of India which have electricity just for 4 hours, 6 hours. And then you look at the faces of the youngsters over there, there's a world of difference. And I think that's the difference that we as responsible citizens of India have a responsibility to bridge. It is in our hands to be able to influence the lives of many of the younger people who live outside the domains of our availability and our access. And I think if we can work together on this, I think we'll have done our bit for society.
That's great. Any other comments or remarks? Okay. So maybe we will open up the floor for questions. If people can introduce themselves before they ask the question. And I would request people to be brief, maybe like 15-20 seconds with the question. If you have any discussions, we will have some networking opportunity. Do I? Yeah. Okay, Amresh. Yeah.
I'm Amresh Deshpande from Schneider Electric. So I'm sorry to be asking the question first, considering that I work with Dr. Satish and he's been asking quite a few questions. But my question is for Dr. Mathur. In the recent survey that we conducted, we observed that cost was one of the largest drivers when it came to industries making investment in energy efficiency. If that is the case, if industries do recognize that cost saving is one of the key decision points, why is it that industry has not embraced energy efficiency with open arms, as one would expect? Especially in the past few years, where we have seen regulations becoming more and more as a trigger for industries to invest in such measures.
Amresh, actually, there has been a huge pickup on energy intensity by large industry. And this is true even in the very macro level data. Whether you look at the energy intensity of the country as a whole, or if you look at the energy intensity of the manufacturing sector, there are dramatic declines. So large industry certainly is investing in energy efficiency. The problem occurs as soon as you go to SMEs, where the issue of is it right for me becomes important. The issue of, well, I have a certain amount of cash in my pocket. I have a huge demand. Should I expand? Or should I invest in energy efficiency? Or should I invest in making something else? Should I start making soap? These issues start becoming much more important than they are for the large industry. And that's the reason that I am extremely glad that Schneider is going around to 50 places showing what is possible, because I do believe that seeing is believing, and that leads to investments.
Just complementing what Dr. Mathur has said. In fact, the real potential of energy efficiency lies in all those SMEs. You know, definitely the large corporation, with the pressure of the businesses, with the pressure of the consumer, they have to be, you know, much more vocal, much more, you know, open in terms of what they are doing in terms of energy efficiency, because regulators demand that, business pressure, competition ask for that. But in India, the driver of the economy is in that SMEs and small businesses. Where imagine, you know, the people have that small motor running, you know, nobody takes care of how much energy it's consuming as long as it's producing something. Now, once we are able to educate them through this initiative, and that's the objective, that guys, even if it is a small business, even if it is a small furnace, even if it is a small motor, even if it is a small engine which you are running, as long as you can save not only the electricity, but even consumption of diesel, that's going to add to your pocket, that will make the difference. And that's where the whole scenario will change. That's what we have to focus on.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur and Anil. Any other question? Yeah, please.
This is Rahul Bagadia from P Manifold. My question is to Dr. Mathur and also Mr. Gopal Saxena.
Can you speak closer to the mic, which we are not able to?
Hi. Oh, this is better.
Yeah.
So I am seeing like utility as a good aggregator to drive energy efficiency from two aspects, like one of reducing their own AT&C losses, as Mr. Mathur was saying, and second is like how utility can become an aggregator to really drive sort of energy efficiency retail loans to its end customers, could be commercial, industrial, that way. So specific on AT&C loss reduction, like to Dr. Mathur, like can there be a sort of programmatic financing for really scaling up sort of smart metering and measurements on the utility side? And second, like can there be a joint sort of financing mechanism? Like today we can finance mobile phones, right? I just go in a shop, Bajaj Alliance, they give me finance and immediately I can get it. So something similar that can happen for compressor, refrigerator, where utility can also come as an aggregator. So there is already a star labeling program, let's say for the compressor, where B is coming in. Utility is taking as a credit line because it is its customer and supply is controlled by utility. Banker is coming in and the ESCO agency. So between these four players, a good retail financing mechanism to drive energy efficiency and scaling of the smart metering initiative.
I'm going to give half the answer and request Mr. Saxena for the other half. The half that I'm going to provide is on the reduction of AT&C losses. Mr. Saxena is a private utility here in Delhi. If you just have to look at the numbers to see how loss reduction has occurred. I mean, it's truly interesting to see that if you have a system-based approach, it's not simple. I mean, he can tell you all kinds of stories on the kinds of challenges that they face. Now, but your question was on financing. What the government of India has done is that under a program called APDRP, Accelerated Power Reforms and Development Program, monies are made available to distribution companies, to public sector distribution companies. And the goal is that using this money, they change transformers, they change conductors, they have longer high voltage transmission systems so that the overall system efficiency becomes higher. If they are able to reach a loss of less than 15%, then half of this money is converted into a grant. If they don't, it remains a loan. So I can't imagine a more strong signal. And how much is this money? 50,000 crores. So it's a huge bit of money. As part of this, the first step is a metering issue. So therefore, putting in smart meters mean different thing to different people, but the point is you should be able to interrogate it. Meters first on the edges of the distribution system and then in the center, so that the utility can have a real-time access to how is energy being supplied. Right? So this is what is being done as far as reduction of AT&C losses is concerned. On your second issue, Mr. Saxena has been part of he has led actually with CII the development of a model which I think is similar to what you're talking about, and I'll leave him to tell us about it.
I think I'll just add one more thing on what Dr. Mathur said. I think in Delhi we have achieved all that Dr. Mathur talked of without any APDRP funding. So we have our entire distribution chain fully metered, we have smart meters in place, not necessarily the smart as interactive type meters, but certainly smart enough to give us all the data that we need. And the third thing, which supplements what Dr. Mathur said, that we possibly have the most steep loss reduction trajectory in this country certainly, and possibly in many other parts of the world. We brought down losses in South and West Delhi from 52% 5% to now 16% across our entire licensed area, where the national average is just 1% per annum. But having said as much, I think what is of greater interest to us is that losses in South Delhi are just about 10%, which is virtually equivalent to what obtains in many parts of the developed world. Coming to the second part, we worked with the CII on this very innovative model to make available finance through banks, through financial agencies and through ESCOs to people seeking such finance to improve the energy efficiency in either their homes or their establishments. And this venture is going to be rolled out very soon through the banks. The DISCOM and BRPL, to start with, will be the aggregator. And we will also do the measurement and verification so that we are able to supply all the statistics with respect to the usage, etc. And we are working very closely with the BEE in promoting star-rated appliances. Our thrust particularly is on consumer goods. And we've also identified a few other areas in the industrial and the consumer segment, and particularly pumps and water pumping. And that's something which we are going to be working on. In fact, my head of new initiatives, Kiran Allah, is sitting over here. And I mean, if any of you have any queries on this, Kiran or the CII team would be most happy to provide further details on this initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Saxena. Thank you, Dr. Mathur. We'll take one more question before we wrap up. So if there is any other question from the audience.
Okay, I will ask if nobody is asking.
Yes, Prakash, yeah, please go ahead.
My question is to Mr. Gopal Saxena. Last 7-8 years, we have added a huge generation capacity. But if you see, the peak deficit is every year is 10%. So we don't know where this capacity is going, but the deficit remains 10%. Now, what we see improvement is from the regulator side is time of day tariff is now being permitted. How do you see the electricity market going to get changed with this, first? Second, how do you see Schneider can play a role in terms of helping the distribution utilities to really make this particular regulations really a reality? Because just passing a regulation may not be sufficient in terms of applying that. So what will be your advice to Schneider Electric? Which direction we should be taking?
Thank you, Prakash. I think you asked me to respond to 3 questions, which I could speak for us. But let's take the first of your observations. There is a huge jump in generation capacity. Today, the generation capacity in India is about 230,000 megawatts, and it's growing. And the country did a commendable job in putting in 55,000 megawatts in the last plan period. Having said as much, the problem is that our peak demand is still pegged at 130,000 megawatts. That's the sum total of the demand that registered on our grid during the peak period. So virtually 100,000 of that generation capacity is non-productive for various reasons, and we can debate about that. So it's not only the generation capacity, but the downstream growth in the transmission sector, the central transmission utilities, the state transmission utilities, and finally the distribution sector. The power sector is like an elephant. Today, the body of that elephant is the central generation stations. The trunk is like the transmission utilities, and the legs are like the distribution sector. The body is becoming bloated. The legs are becoming weak. God knows what will happen to the elephant. So, but we can Second thing you said was, in our quest for energy efficiency, why don't we look at financial incentives to contain the energy usage, and time of day metering is on time of usage tariff has been promoted. Apart from industry, time of usage has never really caught on in the world. Unless you look at organized time of usage, where you're looking at large cooling systems, for instance, or you're looking at pump storage or something like that. For a consumer, when I get out of my house at 9 a.m. and I come back at 8 p.m., I want my air conditioner on from 8 p.m. to 9 a.m. And I'm not going to change that, even if the tariff changes. So I think there is a lot of introspection that is required in bringing about tariff changes which affect the domestic consumer. No mall is going to change its usage pattern just because the time of day tariff and night is larger. There will be no footfalls. So then what you have to promote is energy efficiency rather than tariff. The third thing that we worked obviously with Schneider on many of these issues is to make available technology that promotes energy efficiency. Right. And I think that is the imperative that we have to keep on working along. But then we have, many days to debate over this, so I am all yours.
Yes. It's coming to the numbers of shortage. This year, the highest demand in the country, I think, occurred somewhere in the middle of July, 18th July or something of that sort. After the demand had been met, electricity was still available on the exchange for 3 rupees 50 paisa. That means the delivered cost of electricity will be 550 or something of that sort. And loads were still dropped at that time. Why were loads dropped? Because for most distribution companies, the tariff that they get is 4.5 rupees, 5 rupees, in other words, less than what they would recover from the consumer compared to what it would cost them to provide that electricity which was still available. So, when we began, Mr. Saxena talked about the challenge of affordability. I think we have hit it. And that is why the issue is, how do you convince various kinds of consumers that it is the only option for them to invest in energy efficiency if they are concerned about managing their bills?
Okay, so thank you very much to all the distinguished panelists. I will hand it over to the MC and to invite Dr. Koshi Cherel for the Thanksgiving.
Yes, sir, but before that, we'd like to thank our esteemed panelists for their participation. I'd request you, sir, please, to present them with mementos, a token of our appreciation.
You want to?
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and for your participation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Yes, sir. And as Dr. Kumar just said, I'd like to invite forward Dr. Koshi Cherel to render the vote of thanks, please. Please, sir.
On behalf of Schneider Electric India and AEEE, I take this opportunity to thank each one of the panelists for their valuable contribution of ideas in taking energy efficiency agenda forward. IEEE is highly privileged to be co-hosting the launch of the Xperience Efficiency 2013 with Schneider Electric by marking the critical need for recognizing energy efficiency as a valuable resource. Our esteemed panelists reaffirmed the urgent need to prioritize and tap into energy efficiency opportunities as a means of yielding energy and demand savings that can displace electricity generation from coal and other fossil fuels. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency has already rolled out ambitious energy efficiency policies, programs, and targets for India. The Xperience Efficiency Yatra would spearhead this message to 50 cities across India. I would also like to thank the audience for their attention and interest. India needs more entrepreneurs and consultants, as well as equipment and technology providers to take part in this market transformation, such as through competitive energy efficiency services and solutions to be more easily available. This requires viable financing, better equipment standards, continued R&D, as well as policy directives and smart regulations, as our panelists pointed out. We welcome more participation and active engagement of various industry leaders and experts for making energy efficiency viable, reliable, and attractive business. The Xperience Efficiency Survey shows that most industries in the country are making investments in energy efficiency driven by rising energy costs. However, the survey also tells us though most of the respondents would like to reduce their energy costs, over half of them have not been able to define clear goals and targets, nor do they have the know-how to reduce energy costs. This was highlighted by our panelists also. This is a huge opportunity for those committed to promoting energy efficiency. Thus, the time for energy efficiency is now. Let us make the best of this big opportunity. Once again, a warm thank you to each one of you. We invite all of you to join at Azure for networking, as well as the copies of the report of the study that was done by Schneider and IEEE. Thank you all. Good night.